if you don't trust that director and don't love them, then you're not going to want to give them your soul. And it's so exposing to be up there on that stage or that in front of that camera and go, I'm going to go through this weird fucking self exploration and make myself very ugly and very vulnerable. And if I'm really, as we discussed earlier, you're really going to go there in a non-judgmental way, it can be either really embarrassing because it ends up being kind of comedically bad, or it can be kind of cruel and you actually, I've got this demon inside me, or whatever it is, whatever it is which is exposed. If you don't trust a director, or you don't like them and they haven't made the effort and said to you like in advance, sort of, I appreciate what you're doing here, bringing my story to life, and I hope you can trust me. And it's funny, I've worked with directors and I just haven't got on with them as well as I could have done, and it's really, really hard to then give them, as I say, give them everything, give them your soul on set.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
James Norton is an actor. On the occasion of the release of his new film, Mr. Jones, he sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work.
Do you have like a base layer to your character work that you have to lay down first, that you like to build from?
So I know actors who build it on from shoes or a jumper. Like they need their one piece of clothing, and actually, to be honest, like there is something to be said in the first time you put on, particularly in theatre, I think, like the shoes of a character and suddenly feel that kind of the connection they have with the physical world. For me, this isn't really about character. My process, I start with the research and I start with the kind of the books and the literature around the subject, just so I know that I'm prepared. But that really is not only ultimately, when it comes to the playing of the person, it's not useful often, and it can be actually detrimental because you end up playing the research, you play the facts, and you've got so much stuff to get over because you've read so many books and you want to convey it all, and that's like can be crippling. So I try and make an active effort to do that before even kind of heading into the head of the character, and then put it aside. And then the base layer for the person, I always say that the key to any performance is you have to learn to love the character. You have to learn to, empathy is a word which actors love to sort of bandy around a lot. But in order to play in each scene, every moment of kind of lust, yearning, fear, whatever it might be, which is that character is facing in that moment, and every action and choice which they make, you have to fully empathize with each of the reasons why they are making those choices. So that might be, writing a biography, learning about their family, learning about the trauma which they carried from when they were 3 or whatever it is, which informs that choice. But you cannot judge it. You can't stand outside it and go, I wouldn't make that choice. That's the wrong choice. You have to love that person to the point where you will be like, oh yeah, I get it. I totally get it. So even when you're playing, like, this is the darkest thing, and one of the biggest challenges I found was playing, a murdering, raping psychopath, and trying to learn to love them to the point where when they are choosing to commit these horrific crimes, that it's from a place of fear and dog eat dog, and if they don't hit the world will hit them, and all those sort of complex reasons for choosing your path. So I guess it's about going into a kind of therapy session with your character, and just as a therapist or a lover is unconditionally loving of that person and their choices, I think you have to be too. And so I guess that is a very wafty way or potential way of saying, for me, it's all about not just understanding them in an intellectual way, but loving them in an emotional way, trusting them, completely empathizing with each of their choices.
You're making me think that there is this certain thing that maybe separates a good performance from a great performance, which is that judgment thing, which is that actually separates the performer from the performance in a weird way. I'm not using the right words. It's almost like if you don't get over that judgment thing, you're going to be quote performing.
Yeah, exactly. You're bringing the performer into the performance.
Yeah.
And you don't want. Some people are afraid of if you go fully into that space without keeping the audience aware that, as the actor, as the person, this isn't me. I don't fully
Yes.
condone this behavior. I just want to make sure that I'm off the hook ethically, morally, because that's someone else. If you even have those thoughts in your mind and you're in that moment going, just want to make sure, guys, like a little caveat here, then of course that's going to sort of, however infinitesimal the kind of the sense of that is, it's going to infect your performance. And I think you can, and to various degrees in some performances, you really sense that kind of, and it's not just about not committing to it. It's also about maybe like giving it ever so slight kind of comedic flair, or maybe, making them as overtly demonstrative, or where their performance is ever so slightly hammy, so that it kind of extracts them from the real world, and the actor is protected from going there. And I think if the first thing you do is fully, I always use that. I always say, love that person as if they, are your, the one person, and your brother or your girlfriend or your mother or whatever it is, whatever the relationship is. If you somehow to tap into that, comparable relationship in your own life and really feel that, then there is no judgment, and hopefully there is no sense of there being, and as you say, the separation between performance and performer.
Here's a quote about you. You said, "It's one of the last things I do before going on the stage. I find the mirror and look into the eyes and try to look in the eyes of the character and not my own eyes."
I do that.
First of all, if I was ever on a stage and then I just was like, oh yeah, James does this, I'm going to try to do this for opening night, I look in the mirror, I would be like, oh my God, you're not the character. You idiot. You thought you were, it would be the one moment where I would suddenly lose all preparation. But just tell me what that does to you, really.
It's something I've done ever since I started acting, from before drama school, I think. And I do it in film when I'm feeling like I am about to walk onto a set or a scene which is requiring real presence of mind. I didn't spend hours, just on a kind of walking 1/8 of a page in my trailer looking at my mirror. But days when and every time I go on stage, every time the before the curtain goes up and we are in that kind of 3-minute call, and the DSM is calling us to the stage, and I've got my makeup on, I've got my costume on, I've had my water, and I'm a diabetic, so I've had my sugars. The last thing I do just before I leave the dressing room is I look into the mirror, and I don't know what it is. It's simply, for me, it's not terrifying. I do sometimes look and see James, and then I have to hold it, and I just wait and wait and wait.
Oh, that's interesting.
Occasionally I've been pretty late for the DSM. They're like, James, in a third call, like, you really need to come to stage right now. And usually it's just a quick flicker of the eye. And it's a bit like what you were saying there before. It's for me personally in my own private way. And I don't, I do realize this can sound in isolation a little pretentious, but it's the moment I hope to be able to, differentiate between performer and performance, and it's a little ritual which has probably become a little kind of obsessive now, and I have to do it before I go on stage. But it certainly helps me through my process, just to kind of punctuate that moment where for the next 3 hours or next 2 hours, whatever, I'm gonna try as much as I can. Obviously it's not fully, any actor who claims that they completely leave behind their self and ego and they step into this other, is complete bullshit. But that's the whole point of performance. The whole point of acting is to go on those stories and embodies this world and this person and this life as much as you possibly can, whilst keeping that sort of third voice, the practical voice saying, stand there, move there, alive. But for me, that process, that kind of extracting as much as I possibly can from me, James, into whoever I am playing, that's the punctuation mark, that's the full stop, and then the beginning of the next sentence is the mirror. It seems like when you first start acting, you're trying to convince everyone else that you are the character, but you're forgetting that the most important thing is convincing yourself
that you are the character. And then once you've convinced yourself, which we don't think takes convincing, but it actually does. I mean, and it's almost like that, like you're waiting to convince yourself. And then you're stepping out on the stage, and that's the moment where you can confidently perform. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, I think if it's interesting you said it, because what you were just reminding me of something, one of the most important and memorable things my the principal of my drama school said, and actually it kind of goes against what you said, but it's obviously you're right. Like the aim, hopefully, is that the most authentic version of that person you can give to the audience will persuade them. I mean, you'd hope that authenticity and something which is tapping into the soul of a person, a character, will by definition take the audience on that journey. I think you have to be careful with that though, because yes, via persuading yourself, going through that process, doing the work, you take the audience with you. That's the best, the best set of circumstances. My principal said this interesting thing where we did this one exercise where we had to sing a song and learn a poem, the whole year group. And this one, we did it every term, I think. And this one, it's called Verse and Song, one term, something infected the whole year. I don't know what it was. We all got crazily emotional, and and the poems, irrespective of what they were about or the song, suddenly became these vehicles. And I don't know, it was something to do with we were all tired, or I don't know, the weather, but we all just like got on stage and in our respective performances just burst into tears, and it all became this very kind of self-indulgent kind of, look at me, I'm able to bring up everything. That's slightly different because we weren't playing characters, but what he said at the end of that really stuck with me, which was that he was like, guys, at the end of it, we all sat down and were like, absolutely nailed it, gave him my soul, feeling amazing, the best actor in the world. And he goes, guys, I appreciate that you've, been very open and honest in this exercise, but as an audience member, I don't really give a fuck if you feel it. I only really give a fuck if I feel it. I paid for the ticket. I don't want to come and watch you sit up there and sob your eyes out if I'm left feeling hollow and empty. And that was so poignant because yes, you have to put yourself as an actor that you're entering into that other headspace, and yes, you have to go on that transition for their sake. But your priority always has to be them. And if you find that your journey is so sort of self-involved and indulgent, and actually starts to completely deny their presence, the audience, then they're just going to get really pissed off. And that happened, and obviously that applies to theatre particularly, but I think film as well. There's nothing worse than watching a self-involved performance on film, and as an audience member you just feel, I feel totally shut out of this, even though I can see you're going through this incredible process. So it's an interesting balance. Yes, you have to trust your own transformation for the audience's sake, but always with them in mind. It's always with the audience in mind.
I like to have actors talk about directors. I think a nice way to ask you about directors is maybe to talk about two directors you very recently worked with, and like 30 some years separate them, but they're both, one of them is on the way to be if she already isn't a brilliant, legendary director, Greta Gerwig, she's on her way. And Agnieszka Holland is a legendary director. And within the past couple of years, you worked with these two women. It seems like you, from other interviews, that you had a good time with these people. But I want to know from your particular needs as an actor and what these directors did to help those needs. I mean, and sometimes even like good directors don't necessarily give you exactly what you need, but you can appreciate them and feel like you're in good hands. And I would just like to know about those two aspects, how they were giving you what you need, and if they weren't, and some other director that you worked with tapped into something either on purpose or by accident that you needed, and if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I think did you see Michelle Williams' speech recently? Was it the Globes or the Emmys? I can't remember, where she said thank you to those producers who and directors who gave me what I needed. They you paid for the dance class, you paid for the dialect coach, you gave me everything I needed, and I'm so grateful for that, because so many times you're not there. And I think you're right. Like a director, from the very moment you sign up to a movie, you know if a director is an actor's director. And I think with Agnieszka and Greta, you can kind of be fairly certain just from their work that they're going to be an actor's director, and they are going to, you know, actors sound slightly sort of self-involved, but you need to protect the space of performance, that sacred stage. And when you're not on theatre, in theatre, you know, a film set has a stage, and you need to protect that. And character and performance has to come front and center of any movie. And if you find yourself in a movie where it's all about the special effects or costumes or whatever it is, then you know you're not really you probably are not working with a director who is an actor's director. So you know straight away whether they're on your side if they give you any rehearsal time, for example, which sounds ridiculous considering, you know, you do 6 weeks minimum on a play, and then suddenly you're doing this huge, like, multi-million studio dollar movie, and they ask you to turn up on set for your first day, and you've got this proposal scene, and you've never met the actor playing your fiance. You know, it's insane. And then you think, then you know you're in trouble. Greta had us all turn up, and all the actresses playing the sisters, and myself and Louis and Timothy, and we all turned up, and we went for about over a week, I think, and we rehearsed and we talked and we just deconstructed these relationships, and that is so important. You know, you feel like you have the kind of the backstory and the wealth of experience that person has, and all the things which inform those choices in the scenes. You've discussed them, you know where he's come from, you know when he fell in love with Meg, and so, you know, that was wonderful. Also, I've got to say, just from the point of view of Greta being a female director and having a female driven film, there's so many movies where, and I know this from my girlfriend and other actresses, where women have, you know, and understandably, shockingly, have played the girlfriend. You know, it's like drives them mad, and I get it, because so many films written by and directed by men have often just played lip service to those roles, you know, and it's like, oh, I've got another audition, it's the girlfriend role. And, you know, sensibly, Timothy and myself, and well, certainly Louis Garrel and I were playing the boyfriend role. You know, we were like the guy coming in, and we were playing the husband. And, you know, I couldn't have criticized Greta if she just brought us on and we'd been, you know, the kind of it's the girl's story, it's not our story, and we were there to sort of facilitate their story and pay witness to them. And Greta didn't do that at all. She didn't fall into that trap at all. There was no sense of like, oh well, you know, it's the girl's turn now. The boys can, you know, play the token, the love interest. She got us there. Louis and I, we didn't have many scenes, but we were there in all the rehearsals. We were excavating our characters from the very beginning. So that's, sorry, long-winded answer of saying rehearsal is key. And Agnieszka also had me in Poland for. She flew me out, I think 2 or 3 times before the film started, and we sat and had lunch and talked about Gareth, and she gave me references, and we talked about, you know, the literature around him. And so and then I guess it's like, you know, a lot of directors will say it's all about casting, and that's not entirely true, but there is an element of that way. If you get the actors you trust and you believe that they can do it, and you believe that they've done the work in the rehearsals, then hopefully allowing them into that space, wearing those clothes with the set and the person they're standing opposite, you will, and the writing, Greta's writing is fantastic, obviously, that is enough in a way. And then but the trap so many directors fall into is that they need to vindicate their position, and they need to justify their, you know, their presence on that set. And the worst thing is to be directed, guided, whatever it might be, told what to do before you've even spoken a single word. And that happens a lot. Where the director will come and, you know, maybe sit in your trailer and go, okay guys, so I'm thinking this scene, what I need is this and this and this, and you're like, I haven't even done it yet, like, what are you doing? You know, in a way, a director, I guess you could call them correctors, because ideally as an actor, what you want to do is be allowed a go, have your instinct, whatever your instinctive version of the scene is, let them have that. If it's not what the director wants, then let them come in and mold and guide and whatever it might be, gently. Never give a line reading. Never, that goes without saying, but, you know, it's a bit like therapy. You know, a therapist will never say, you're mentally ill, you know, you have this mental problem because of this. You know, my therapist is always like, allowing me to make my own judgments about myself, and that's what a director should be doing as well. I guess, yeah, it's about allowing the actor their own sort of self-discovery, and usually I think that will be the best performance if it's rooted in their own instinct. And something which another director did, which I've now tried to recreate in my mind, which maybe Agnieszka and Greta didn't, but that's not a shortfall on their behalf. It's just a simple technique thing. Other directors have used this, but Tom Harper I worked with, who's a brilliant director, who did a TV series called War and Peace, an adaptation of the Tolstoy epic, with Paul Dano and Lily James and myself playing the kind of the love triangle. And Paul Dano and I had a scene, and it was this very, very poignant, powerful piece of writing where these two men, kind of best friends, soulmates, came together and discussed the sort of state of the nation and their minds and their mental health, and they only saw each other once a decade, and it was this incredibly epic scene, and we did it over and over and over again. And it was, we were sort of finding the nuance and the rhythm, and we were kind of, as a good director, Tom would let us do it a few times, and then he would come in and go, maybe try this, and maybe pick up this pace, whatever it was. And then we had time, which is also another thing with director. If a good director will hopefully allow you time to play and explore and try new things. And at the end, I remember he came over to me and he was like, this is going to sound completely bonkers, but can you just imagine for a second that this morning you woke up and you came downstairs and the head of your estate comes up to you and tells you that one of the women who work on your land was assaulted this morning, and you don't know who it was, but you know that you need to find out who assaulted her, and that's like really, it's tormenting you right now. It's like underneath the skin, but obviously we're not going to talk about it. And he's like, that's it. I just want to see what that does to it. And of course, he took my eye completely off what I was saying, gave me this whole other subtext. Paul didn't even know what was going on, but there I was fuming at this injustice, which nothing to do with the story. And it was brilliant because it suddenly allowed me to, at that point, I'd probably done it 10, 12 times, and I was starting to overthink it, and I was getting into rhythms and falling into sort of repetitive rhythms. And he just gave me a set of circumstances which were totally nothing to do with the scene, and it completely redefined the performance. So again, that's kind of a probably basic drama school trick, but it's something which, if a director and I were realizing that we're falling into some kind of repeated rhythm, or we're not quite finding it, I will quietly, privately give myself a little tweak. Maybe that's that morning I stubbed my toe really badly, or whatever it is, whatever it might be. Doesn't necessarily have to come from the director, but it can just be a little private thing you do.
And what's scary about that, which is amazing, is that somebody can think like, oh, that's amazing, you can just do that. But if it's not right in terms of like the tone of the note, like it has to, like it seems so simple, but you're able to give yourself that because you know exactly what would be needed to stay in the moment, but yet give yourself a little bit of sway in there. Someone else, a less skilled person, would think just anything would work there, and it could be really bad.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's hearing you say that to me, it does make me realize that in a way you can't really do that on your own without speaking to the director. And if you do, you're taking a huge risk. I just think it's about, I guess maybe, unless you're actually conforming on whatever it is which you're going to tweak, it's about just in your own mind. I guess it's just about being brave and trying something new.
Exactly. Like just the idea of trying it. Like we shouldn't be afraid to try it.
No, exactly. And whatever means you need to try something new. I think that's what I mean, is like, if it requires that you need to somehow sort of tweak your base, whatever it is, the sort of the foundations of the way that person is feeling in that moment, and you need to quietly, privately tweak that, then do it. But I think a good director will allow you the opportunity to shake everything up and have another go. And there's nothing better than the director coming up to you at the end of a scene and go, "We've got it, brilliant, I love it. I'm going to give you one for free. Have a go."
Yeah,
joy. Most actors love hearing that, because it's like, brilliant, I can just have a go. And that's, I guess, what I mean about giving yourself some sort of tweak in your given circumstances, because that is a gentle way of doing it on your own terms. And if the director gives you the license to do that, and hopefully they do, then lucky you, because it's a great thing to be able to have a go and throw caution to the wind. And I think usually if you ask the director, and especially if you say to them, please give me one more, I know I've got it in me, I can just tweak this thing and I'm going to find it. And usually apparently that's always the worst take. It's always the first one which the director uses. The actor's convinced that they've got something in them. So look, maybe it's a kind of massively hubristic exercise which I'm describing, and like finding it on your own terms privately, and actually the director's probably already found it. But I'm sitting here thinking, would I tweak my own head? I think, yeah. Anyway.
I actually think that it's the actor that can do that, and it's some unskilled directors that shouldn't, because I think the actor always instinctively knows what they might need to tweak and give them that to still keep them in the scene, or add the right kind of whatever that mysterious other layer is that you're putting on top of it. Yes,
I mean, I think you got to trust the director as well. I mean, if you're going to, it's such a funny thing. It's such a kind of ineffable, like hard thing to kind of to sort of describe. But
yes.
If you don't trust that director and don't love them, then you're not going to want to give them your soul. And it's so exposing to be up there on that stage or that in front of that camera and go, I'm going to go through this weird fucking self-exploration and make myself very ugly and very vulnerable. And if I'm really, as we discussed earlier, you're really going to go there in a non-judgmental way, it can be either really embarrassing because it ends up being kind of comedically bad, or it can be kind of cruel and I've got this demon inside me, or whatever it is, whatever it is which is exposed. If you don't trust a director, or you don't like them and they haven't made the effort and said to you like in advance, sort of, I appreciate what you're doing here, bringing my story to life, and I hope you can trust me. And it's funny, I've worked with directors, and I just haven't kind of got on with them as well as I could have done, and it's really, really hard to then give them, as I say, give them everything, give them your soul on set. So that's another thing which Agnieszka and Greta both did. I mean, particularly Agnieszka, for someone who's so experienced and so revered, and in Poland she's so much more than just a director. She's like a proper sort of icon of the political left. She you walk down the streets and people like literally kind of fall at her feet, and it's not just because of her movies, it's because she's become this kind of, as I say, this kind of emblem. For her to take so much time getting to know me, making sure that I have everything I need, and making sure that we'd have endless dinners together and we would rehearse, all of those things which sound so simple, just meant that from when the moment came to my wanting to, needing, the film needed me to like get there, I was ready. I was willing to like fall, I'll do anything for her, because I loved her, I respected her, I admired her more than just as a filmmaker, but I really liked her as a person. And I think that directors who think they can just kind of get their actors in and ask them to do that without actually saying, I'm on your side and hopefully you're on mine, then it goes a long way just to make sure you get on with your director, which sounds so simple but it's so important.
Here's a quote from Agnieszka. James found a very minimalist way of playing this man. She was talking about Mr. Jones. That was very true and very appealing. He didn't try to act. He tried to really embody this guy. Mm. And isn't this a really strange profession? When like the person who hired you said you really did a good job because you didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like, and that we all know what this means though. When you don't act, when you don't quote act, that's when you're really doing good acting.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
And this quote really hits on something in this movie that you had to really embody, which was the Ukrainian sequence, which happens, which I appreciated it as a filmmaker because it broke from formula. It broke from from so many things, and we still felt like we were in the hands of a master, you know, and we're seeing, and basically what your character just turns into this reactor, you know. There's probably were weeks there where you had no dialogue, you had no traditional scenes with people, you just had to you react for us, you're taking everything in, and I just wanted to know what those days were like for you. Was that a stressful time for the work because of how different it was from just regular acting, or was it a welcome change where it's like, now I can just do this kind of minimalistic work? But I imagine it could have been really, really hard.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to kind of trust that the trust when the director says, I got it. Firstly, that they got it, because often actors make mistakes where they go, no, I didn't, I needed to show you more, and the camera picks up everything, particularly in the eyes. It's like, you know, that kind of very overused phrase there, the window to your soul, but it's true. You know, you need to do very little to tell the story. And you know, the trust also is trusting the audience, trusting that they are, you know, they don't need these big signposts, these big kind of, I'm feeling this right now, or, you know, that's also to do with when you score a film or you grade it. Like, yes, bad directors will give no credit to the audience, and, you know, they don't give them the benefit of the doubt, and actors can do the same. One of the most amazing directors I worked with was a guy called Richard Wilson, who he's most famous for being a sitcom in the UK, but he's also a theatre director here, and he directed me in my second play I ever did, and he would go on and on at me about just being open, and he kept saying, you're frowning, you're kind of, you're constantly showing me that you're like going through these processes, and human beings don't do that. And this play we did was called That Face, very emotionally charged play, and lots of shouting and screaming and kind of, you know, high stakes. And he didn't let me shout once. He was like, human beings don't shout. Like, very rarely do you actually, yeah, when was the last time you actually like screamed, let rip? It doesn't happen. You know? Once in a blue moon you go, fuck off. But generally everything is simmering underneath. It's all subtext. It's all in the eyes. And so he made me trust that, you know, doing little, as long as you're in that moment, and hopefully you're able to allow the circumstances of the scene and the work you've done with the director to, as you know, again, going back to what we were saying before, you're never going to fully actors never fully immersed in the role. Like, you can do a Daniel Day-Lewis and you can become as close as you possibly can to Lincoln, but you're never going to become Lincoln. But as long as you're like there to great enough extent and to a great enough degree, then it will communicate. And that's a great director, again, to be able to, for someone to just to come over to you and say, I'm getting it all, it's so good. To keep following your instincts. You don't need to show me anything, you don't need to do anything, you don't need to act, you just need to be there watching this scene. And again, you know, you asked me what the director can give you. A good director will make sure that you have whatever it is which you're reacting to there. So, you know, either it's the actor behind camera feeding you the lines, or it's something like simply, you know, sometimes it's impossible to provide you with exact, you know, whatever it is which you're looking at. But, you know, as much as is possible, they protect you and the experience the character are going through in order to kind of allow for that authenticity to be communicated. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a learning curve to particularly your relationship with the camera as well. I think particularly when you start film, I did the traditional theatre to film move, and did 2 years of theatre before I did anything on film, and that, you know, they are the same mediums. They ultimately, you know, we are still telling stories, but I did have to remind myself that I wasn't having to kind of communicate to the people at the back of the gods, and I have this thing in front of me which is capable of capturing more than human beings. The person sitting opposite me at the dinner table will probably miss certain flickers and nuances, idiosyncrasies, which the camera will pick up. So that was a learning curve, to really kind of trust the camera, trust the director who says, I got it, don't give me more. Trust the audience to know that they're going to get it, and they don't need much to be on the journey with you. And I definitely lean into that for sure. I love, you know, less is more for me. It's all about that for sure.
Yes, and we appreciate that as audience members.
I mean, same here. I love it. I mean, nothing more. I love being. It's funny. That same play, funny enough, was put on Broadway, off Broadway, and apparently they did a version which was very big and demonstrative. Not this is all American actors. I promise you, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But that, the difference between the actor who, and some people love it. Some audience members love it. They love being pinned to the back of their seat and everything. It's like it's so impressive and it's boisterous and muscular, and that's a certain taste, and that's great. And then there's the kind of Gary Oldmans who sort of you're leaning in, and you want more, and you're like, what is that? And personally, my own taste is aligned with the latter, and I like to watch that, but I also like to hopefully perform in that way as close as I can.
You have a close relationship with someone who I think is one of our greatest actors, Imogen Poots. Sometimes I think about her because she's so smart. She is off social media, and she's such a huge reader. And I think a trait of a good actor is picking up things from other actors that you work with, and using those things that work. But in this case, I was wondering, when you have a close relationship with somebody that's a great actor, like, are you pulling these things that seem like they would really help from people like her?
We met doing a play together. We met on stage. So we, before we were in a couple, we were, as I say, kind of working together. And you learn from everyone you work with, I guess, if you're open and porous and inquisitive, which hopefully actors are, because that's kind of why we all do this, to learn and understand people. I mean, like we're very different. She reads a lot, and she incredibly sort of inquisitive mind, and constantly just self-education. It's incredible. It's inspiring, and I have taken from her that. I mean, I have the books on my desk, which I would never. I've got Toni Morrison right here, Source of Self-Regard. I would never be reading this book. Imogen, it's amazing, and so in that sense, she's been incredible. Sort of, she's incredible for me, and in that sense, I've learned an enormous amount from her. As far as an acting is concerned, I mean, we watch each other's stuff, and I think you learn from watching your own stuff as well as someone so intimately, and then watching their work, you kind of see the transformation. And but then I guess, to be honest, I probably learn more from people I know less, because I don't see anything of their person on the screen, whereas I see I see the person I know most intimately in the world. I see various bits of them being borrowed for each role. So in a sense, to watch someone who you don't know at all, probably learn as much, if not more. But mostly we learn, I guess the most important thing about being with anyone in the world is that that's your fuel. And so really respectful of who she is and her process, I am indebted to her, because that's who I live my life with, and therefore that informs every role I play, because we sort of trundle through this weird world together, and being in a relationship with someone is as I say, your part of your fuel for the roles you play. And so in that sense, it's not really about her as an actor, which I learn from. Of course, I'm in great admiration of her, and she'll hate me saying this, but she's an amazing actress, and of course I learn from her work. But I learn more from just being in her life and her in mine.
You're at a point in your career where it seems like you're doing this amazing work, like Mr. Jones, and starring in things like McMafia, serious stuff that you're able to really flex your acting chops, and then at the same time you're being talked about for like ultimate leading man stuff. Okay, we won't mention what that is, but like people are talking about stuff like that, which would be on another level. And I'm always fascinated by the rare time I get to talk to somebody in that space, where it's like the idea of having people maybe talking to you, your people, and saying, you need to make this move to this next level, whatever they think that is, like where you're being talked about on that scale. So you have to start start thinking differently. Like, I want to know how that affects, if that is true, that's going on, and how that affects you and where that all lands in this whole work.
I mean, not really. It doesn't really affect you. I mean, you can let it affect you, and I think it probably doesn't do you any help services, because I think, ultimately you want to work with people like Agnieszka and Greta because they are the best, and they're the best storytellers and the best filmmakers out there, and that's your fuel, that's the energy which should drive you. Ending up, the aspirational side to it all, and the kind of more media kind of coverage side of it, is obviously a part of it, but I don't think it shouldn't necessarily inform your choices. I think if it does, then you start to kind of fall into traps, which at least from my point of view, I don't think I necessarily want the career which is going to get me the most Instagram followers. I want the career which is going to allow me to work with as many Gretas and Agnieszkas as I possibly can. So, and of course it would be narrow-minded and short-sighted of me to think that, not having any kind of momentum and the kind of thing you're describing, that does open doors, and it does allow you to work with the best people and tell the best stories. And in that sense, I'm not totally naive to the importance of that other side of the industry, but I think most actors would agree that, it's secondary, obviously, to the work, and it's a means to an end, but it shouldn't be the end in itself. Yeah, I mean, I've recently started a production company with an amazing producer, and we're building a slate of stuff which I'm really excited about, because it's mine, it's ours. We've come up with these stories and these ideas ourselves, and we're looking to option these books and articles, and suddenly it's like taking control of the stories. I mean, that's for me been an amazing privilege and a dream. And they might pop, and they might become these big successful shows, and they might get me lots of media coverage, but more importantly, they're the stories I really want to tell, and that's making me incredibly happy. So and I guess that's all you can hope for. I'm feeling creatively fulfilled. So yeah, I think you kind of you're aware of it, you have amazing people around you and your team to be more aware of it and kind of understand it and organize it. But generally, if you spend too much time thinking about that side of it, it takes your eye off the ball, and I think you'll do your job. You won't do your job as well as a result.
James Norton, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.